Hi guys, I'm Joe, and this is A Cool Dry Place. What I want to do today is build with you a birdhouse kind of like this. This is a bad sketch, but it should give you an idea where we want to go with this. Overall dimensions, so you get an idea of the scale here, it's going to be about 13 inches tall and about 5.5 inches square on the bottom there. My target market for this birdhouse is going to be a house wren. They're just gray feathers, not very remarkable in that way. They do have a pretty song, and there's generally quite a few of these birds around. Like if you've seen one, there's probably 20 of them around. There's probably 20 of them in one of my bushes out in the backyard. Then the house wrens, from what I've discovered, I've did just a little bit of internet sleuthing on these guys, is they like to have their door be somewhere between 1 inch to 1.25 inches. I happen to have right in the middle of that, 1 1/8 hole saw, so we'll be using that for their door. Those birds don't generally like a perch here, so we're not going to put a little perch down there, but we are going to do this little front porch down here. I'm not exactly sure where the door is going to be, but probably about in that middle of that 13 inches, give or take. Don't really know yet. This front porch, though, is going to be way down at the bottom, and it's also going to act as the floor for inside the birdhouse, and it will pivot back here so that we can clean out last year's nest. Now, if we decide that after a season or two that porch is not a good idea, like if it's giving the squirrels a leg up to get lunch, we can go back there and we can saw that little front porch off. I'm not planning on having it stick out very far, so it shouldn't be too helpful, but it might be. It might get omitted later. We'll find that out. Cross that bridge when we get to it. So the materials we're going to be using for that is I have some roofing nails, some other random nails, and I found this board out in the garage attic. It's very well patinaed. I like it. We should be able to get 2 birdhouses out of this. And by the way, if you want to build this at home in your own shop, you should be able to get these 2 birdhouse builds out of one 1x6 that's 8 feet long, and then I guess some tin that I'll have to put a cut list for the tin. I will provide a cut list for this, by the way. I'm not sure exactly, but it will be somewhere. I'm new to the YouTube world, so it should be somewhere in the description, or maybe I'll just put out a sheet of paper in the video here so you can see what it is. But so we're using this board here. We got to cut the pieces out of this, and I have this piece of tin that we're going to be using for the roof, or 2 roofs. This came from my house. Funny little story. So I had to drop something down in the return duct, and I went down to go grab it out, and it was just a handful of dust. It was really, really gross. I don't know how. I might have a picture of that. I might have shared a picture with that with my friends. Maybe I'll put it up on somewhere, and you can see you could have grown potatoes in it. It was gross. So let's get to cutting this up and seeing what we can do to assemble this thing. It shouldn't be too long of a build. These are the sides to the birdhouse. We're going to cut them at 7 inches long. They're going to get cut to length after it's kind of been built. You'll see here in a little bit what that means, or what I mean by that. So we did a mark at 7 inches and setting another stop block here so I can make all 4 of these at 7 inches long. There, we stop there. This should be enough left over, I think, for a floor, for 2 floors. Yeah, I think that should be fine. All right, let's go back over to the bench. Okay, guys, we have now, this is our 4 fronts and backs for the 2 birdhouses. So these were cut to 5.5 inches by 13 inches, and it's 3/4 inch stock. And these are the sides to the birdhouses, and these were cut to 7 inches by 4 inches. 4 inches, 7 inches, and again, 4 of them. So give you an idea, and this is going to be the floors. This should be 2 floors here, but we'll cut this later. So we're just going to hold on to that for now. Just to give you an idea of what this is going to kind of look like for now. I'm not really sure how to orientate the boards here. I think so. This has got a pretty good cup to it, and I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to go through the planer. I don't want to go through the joiner to try to get the cup out. We're just going to deal with it the way it is. Just going to be a quick bird house build. I don't know if you can quite see there, if there's daylight coming through there or not, but there's quite a cup to this board, and I'm not going to deal with it. We're going to just try to work with it. So I think that. But I like the look of the side where it's cupped like this, but I think that might be a little more difficult to build that way. I think it might be better if we have the cup, this way to the outside. But let's just put these together for a second so you get an idea. So let's pretend like that's our back. This is going to be our front. These guys are going to go here and here. Yeah, maybe we'll reverse that. I'm not sure if I like it now. And then this on the top. And we're going to nail those or screw those together. Maybe we'll nail them together. I don't know. And then we're going to come back here and cut this out on the bandsaw. So that way we're cutting through not just our fronts and backs at the same time. So we have hopefully the same curve, but then we're also cutting through our sides here at the same time, so that matches the same curve coming off of our fronts and backs. So we do need to keep our fasteners, whether they're screws or nails, below where we think we're going to come out with the bandsaw for the cut. So let's see if we can kind of work through that. Okay, guys, I want to try to get a few things done to the front and the back that I think will be a little bit easier to do before we glue this all up. So one of them is to make the little notch out for the floor to get recessed up in the front, to get recessed up into the front, is we're going to notch out that. So we want to just get a couple of marks on here. And I'm just using the sides as like a thickness gauge to give me an idea how big this notch should be. So I'm just going to put a little mark down here on this side here, and you can maybe tell I already did a little mark over here, but we'll make it a little bit bigger. Right there. Now this material, sorry about that, is about 3/4 of an inch thick, but I want to go a little bit higher than the thickness of this material, because I'm probably going to give away some of these birdhouses to friends or family. And I don't know if they're going to put it in the backyard or if they're going to want to put it on their fireplace or a bookcase or something like that. So I don't want to have a fastener there potentially scuffing the finish on something. So what we're going to do is I'm going to recess this floor up into the birdhouse, so the bottom of the floor is approximately 1 inch above the bottom of the birdhouse. So I'm just taking the combination square and set it to 1 inch. Probably doesn't have to be 1 inch. You could probably set it to about 7/8, but I think it'd be a good idea to recess it a little bit. So something kind of like that. There we go. We'll cut that out on the bandsaw. But let's do a couple other things first too. So let's set that one off to the side. I want to get an idea of, and this doesn't have to be perfect because we could come back to this later, but I want to get an idea of our center line because that's going to drive a couple of things where our bird house door is at. And also I think I want to put some holes up here for ventilation and get an idea of where the peak of the roof is going to be at so that we can kind of lay that out. I want to have at least a loose idea of where that roof is going to end down here anyway, so that we know where to not put our screws or nails. So let's get a center line figured out on here. Use this. Should be long enough. You could use a framing square. If you don't have a long bladed combination square, or even a short bladed one would work too if you just maybe attack it from both sides. Tape measure, so 5.5, what is that? Let's just go 3 5/8 right here. Do the old double measure thingy. 3 5/8 this way. There we go. So this one here should be our center, or darn close. Good enough for the birds. Yeah, this should give us an idea of the center up here too. And it doesn't have to be spot on. We're not looking for that. Let's see here. Where should our hole for the birds be? Does that look good? I don't even know why I'm measuring because I don't know that I care about what the measure is. But let's go with right about here. I think that's about 5 inches up. Sure, about 5 inches up from where the floor should be will be the center hole for our birdhouse. Before we drill this, or before I mark it though, I want to get the roof kind of figured out here. Maybe I should measure how long the tin is. No, that's plenty long, so I don't think we need to worry about that. All right, let's not be real accurate about this. So I'm just going to use the old elbow compass. Let's get an idea here. So we have our sides. My side comes up to here. So we want to go lower than that by quite a little bit. So I'm doing this elbow compass. If you kind of put your elbow down on a spot and then just try to keep your wrist and everything locked up, should give you an idea of, should be close enough for what we're doing. Not gonna work. That might work. I think that will be a little bit better. Let's draw that once and see what that looks like. Yeah, all right, that'll be fine. I like that. All right, we're gonna do this kind of the hard way, I think. I don't know. So I drew a line where our curved line exits the board. I drew that straight across the width of the board so we could kind of get an idea at least where we should end to try to match our, oh, that was actually pretty good, where we should try to match our arc to the other one. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. This is just a little it's for the birds. I think that will be good enough. All right, that should be Not great, but it's perfect for what we're doing. So it should give us an idea where we're going to be cutting our roof. So I know we don't want to put any fasteners really above this line. And this might vary on what you guys do. I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time on this, but I'm trying not to get a fastener, a screw, a nail, or whatever up into here. Or if we do, it's going to have to be just a little bit above this line. So great, that's done. Now let's put a couple of vent holes. And I want to put some vent holes on the front and the back. But I don't know if you guys noticed this little detail in my drawing. Let's see if we can mess this up too much. And that's right here. There's a little like ridge beam. And I want to try to get that in here. I think that that would look cool and probably offer a nice way to hang the birdhouse too, if we decide to hang it from a tree. So let's get that in there. What do we have left over for material? About as square as we can be. That's not too bad. It look a little lopsided. In fact, I think it is. I don't think I like that. But we're going to go with it. So now we know where that's going to be. So let's get our vent holes figured out. Just going to draw a line across here so that these two holes are at least in the same place as there. I think it would look kind of weird if they weren't. Then I think since our little ridge beam is going to come down to here, let's see what that difference is. That is 3/4 of an inch. So let's put our third middle hole down here at about 3/4 of an inch. There. Something like that. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking one hole, hold on a minute here. Let's do a 1/2 inch. Oh, yeah, 1/2 inch. All right, so we have these two holes are 1/2 inch off the center line, here to there. And they're 3/4 of an inch down from where our ridge beam is going to be. This center hole is 1.5 inches down from the bottom of our ridge beam, right in the center. I think we're going to do like a 1/4 inch hole. Now let's go a little bit bigger. Let's go with a 5/16 inch hole for these three holes here. And we're going to do them on the, let's just do them on the front. I don't think I want to do them in the back. We'll just do them on the front part of this birdhouse. All right, let's get the drill out for that. All right, guys, before we go drilling, I want to get a hole, just a little dimple here so that we can, what's what here? I can't see anything. Okay, get a little dimple here so that our drill will follow that of where our holes are going to be. And yeah, I think I'm comfortable with this. So let's go ahead and put our dimple hole for that too. All right, I got a piece of OSB so I don't drill into my bench. I'm going to drill out these three holes here, and then we'll come back in a minute and do this. Probably go ahead and do the other birdhouse though. Yeah, wandered off a little bit, but it's okay. There. Perfect. Where is this? We'll figure that out in a minute. All right, well, let's switch to making a door. All right, we're going to use this birdhouse front. Give us an idea where this birdhouse front door should be. Just kind of line up all your edges. Now we should have our two fronts kind of figured out. All right, so that's good. So we have both of our fronts more or less figured out. Obviously got to do the arch bit here for our Gothic arch and cut our notches out down here. Trying to stay inside of the line. I want to actually see a little bit of that pencil line when we're done with this cut here. At least on the sides. Maybe not so much this line here, but I want to be able to see the pencil line here because I think it might be important when we go to put the sides on. If we have to pare it back down again with a chisel or something, or sand it, that's fine. But I think it'd be easier to have these be a little more generous here than the thickness of the side material, at least for now. Here we're just going right up to the line. And I don't really want to do any finish work on this either, so I'm trying to just take it easy and cut up to that line. It's a little, if it's not the straightest, that's fine. Okay guys, the battery's running a little low on the camera here, so I'm going to try to get this next part here kind of knocked out. And that's going to be just concentrating on making the notch for our ridge beam up here. So at this point we want to pair up what's going to be our fronts and our backs. Kind of line the edges up as best you can. Putting the, oops, and I already screwed up. So we want to have I think it's going to be easier to build this if the curve, in my case, and you might find this in your case too, that you have quite a cupped board. I mean, that is a pretty cupped board. But I think it's going to be easier to build this whole birdhouse if this cup faces the outside of the birdhouse. So I did that correctly on the fronts. That's cool, but we want to make sure we do that correctly on the backs too. So I'm making sure that we have the cups both to the outside like that when we line it up. And I was about ready to screw that up, so we want to make sure that we got that right. I just think that will make things a little bit easier. So again, the cups are on the outside here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to line these up, kind of make sure your edges are flush with one another as best you can. All right, we have 1-inch brads in the brad nailer. And I think that's enough to do what we need to do. I'm going to do 4 brads per birdhouse. Still pretty flush. That's just to keep the front and the back together while we cut out this notch here, so that we have the same notch in the back as we do in the front. All right, guys. All right, we're working on just cutting out this notch here for what I'm calling the ridge beam. And we'll go up to the line. I'm not really concerned if this is A little sloppy, but I don't want it to be too sloppy. Good enough. All right, so let's think ahead here a second. So I'm not going to use a nail gun to put these nails in here. I'm going to use, I don't have a hammer out here, but I'm going to use a regular hammer and nails. And I have these 1¼ inch finishing nails. So I'd like to use these for the fronts and backs to fasten them together. But I want to pre-drill the holes here so that so it makes my life a little bit easier, and also I don't want to have a split in this stuff. I think this stuff, and kind of the reason why our hole was so off center here, off the mark so much, was that when pine like this or Doug fir, whatever this is, when it dries out quite a bit as it ages, and I think this stuff must be pretty old, the difference between the hard and the softwood becomes what I'm getting at is that these darker lines right here are a whole lot harder than the whiter lines in between. I think that the resins and stuff collect in there. Like I can't even put my fingernail into this here, so it's really pretty hard on these darker lines, the darker brown lines. But these sort of manila colored ones are really soft, so it makes things wander. Like it makes drill bits wander. It makes the center punch wander a little bit, and I think it's going to probably. It's already a little more brittle, and so it might make the split. And I would like to not have that. So I want to try to give ourselves the best advantage we can here. Now, if you're using some fresh stuff from Home Depot or Menards or whatever, Lowe's, you're probably not going to have this problem. But still, it isn't probably a bad idea to go ahead and pre-drill the holes for the nails first. I'm only doing it on the fronts and the backs. I'm not going to pre-drill into the sides. I don't think it will be necessary there. I'm just kind of doing it in the fronts and the backs because I think it'll make assembly easier, and it will decrease the risk of something adverse happening. But I'd like to have these be in the same spot too, or have like a cohesiveness to it and have it make sense. So I don't want to just go randomly drilling holes and putting nails in. But let's start out here first. So let's measure how thick this nail is. So it's just a hair over 1/16 of an inch. So that's great. So I'm going to use a 1/16 of an inch drill to pre-drill the holes here. So let's kind of put a line where we want them to be. We already did this line here, and I didn't do it on the other front, but we can transfer that easy enough for where the roof kind of exited on the side. And we're going to use that line where the roof exited on the side as sort of our first hole here. So I set up this other combination square here to be 3/8 of an inch. So that's half of our 3/4 of an inch material. So what we're going to do is set our one side of the beam here on our line, and I want to make an intersection point right here. This will let me know where we want to do our center punch. And then I'm going to just do come up from the bottom, put one side of the beam of the square here in the bottom, and do that same intersection mark up from that. So So you see something kind of like that. So now we have two holes here they're not just ad hoc and on here just willy-nilly. They kind of make sense a little bit. All right, now we just got to drill these holes here to go through fronts and backs. Shit. Well, that sucks. Broke a drill bit. I kind of thought that might happen. Like I said, this stuff is really kind of crazy hard to work with. That's right where I want to nail. Darn it. Step up one size, at least for that hole. I don't think this is going to end well. Maybe we can go on the other side of that drill bit. That worked. Let's go back to a sixteenth though. Hopefully we won't break this one. All right. Now we need to assemble these. All right, guys, it's still the same day here. I put a little more charge in the battery. I'd like to get these glued up so that they can kind of cook overnight. Then we can come back and do some more work to it tomorrow. So using the weather-resistant tight bond here, and we're going to put a generous, well, not too much glue, but just enough glue. Let's kind of get our nails in the holes first. Spread it out to get kind of even coverage. Wiping my finger off there. Pretty good. Try to flush up the sides as best as we can so we don't have to do that much sanding at the end. Oh, that one moved, but no going back now. We could fix it, but it just isn't really worth it. Yeah, this side kicked out. Oh, not quite a 16th maybe at the top, maybe a 16th. Gosh, for pine, this stuff is really hard. Shoot. I'm bending that nail and kicking the side out. Maybe we should have pre-drilled these into the sides too, because like I say, this is really pretty hard for pine or fir or whatever this is. Let's get that nail corrected. That is going to be hopefully this will work. It's not. I'm not trying to pull out, I'm just trying to kind of straighten it a little bit. Shoot. Might have to just go with it here. Let's see if we can straighten it out this way. It's a little bit better, but all right, it turned a little bit, but geez, this stuff is just a tenacious. Well, I guess we're sanding this guy a little bit. Wow. Oh, it split. Darn it. Yeah, we probably should have pre-drilled. We're going to do that in the next one. We're going to pre-drill the next one. It split that side there. Hopefully the glue will... It's not doing its job. I was going to say, hopefully the glue will do its job, but it is not doing its job. Back might be getting 3 nails, huh? Don't do what I did. Let's hope that this one won't have the same fate. Definitely pre-drill on the other side. I think we're going to have to put a 3rd nail on here too, but let's try to set these down a little bit so they can get a little more grip to this whole thing. Oh, crap. I put the wrong side on here. I mean, I put the wrong... The cup is facing in. Well, crap, will this line up though? Yeah, that'll work. Okay. Just so you see, I didn't want to do it this way. I'm gonna have to get a clamp on these too. There's a big gap here. And it's practically tight on the inside though. You probably can't see that very well, but there's practically no gap, a little bit on the inside here. That's just how squirrely this stuff is here. We'll put a clamp on these overnight. But to show you what I did, or the mistake, it's probably not a big deal. But this front was supposed to be turned 180 degrees. Now I got the cup going kind of the wrong way. Not a big deal, and probably actually better that it happened on the front because it won't have clearance issues with our trap floor here when it hinges, since it's not actually going to be touching this front here at all, at least not on the inside. It'll only be touching the very bottom of the front. So I guess that'll be fine. I was a little concerned that maybe this wouldn't fit because if our key or our notches here didn't line up, that might not fit in here. I don't know if you can kind of see what I'm doing here. Yeah. So it'll work out. So I'm going to get a couple of clamps on both of these and let them sit overnight, and then we can come back to this tomorrow and we'll figure out our next step, which I believe is going to be, we'll put our ridge beam in here, cut that to size, more or less, because it's not going to be this long, obviously. That'd be crazy. So we're going to cut this guy to size, get it in there. I'm going to have to do a little bit of chisel work, but get it in there, and then we can cut out our shape. So it should be fun. But it'll really kind of start to see a little bit more tomorrow. Hey guys, here it is the next day, and I just took these out of the clamps. I did clamp them up last night to get a little extra strength in these joints. I was kind of stewing on this though. I think I'm going to add one screw on each front and back to these here. So I have these 1 5/8 deck screws that I think will just get a little more security. The only real reason I'm doing this is because the glue joints are not that great. I mean, the joints altogether are just not that great. And so I think just having a little extra security in there, but we're not going, well, one, I don't have enough screws to put 2 on each side, so that would have been out anyway. And I guess if I had longer nails, I probably wouldn't be worrying about this, but I don't have longer nails and I'm not going to go to the store to get them. So what we're going to do is just going to do one on each front and back, right there in the middle, in between the 2 nail holes here. So, and we're going to pre-drill this. You might not have to do this on yours, but this wood is pretty tenacious. Like I said, it's split, it's very brittle, it's kind of been a problem here. So I'm going to pre-drill this and countersink these just a hair underneath the surface. So let's do that real quick. Let's center point these guys though. Perfect. All right, so how about if we work on sizing our floor up a little bit? So when I cut out the sides to 4 inches, we also cut, we have this scrap left over from that, and this is going to be enough to do the floor for both of the birdhouses. And my guess is that it's going to fit, but it might be a little bit tight. And I want it to actually be a little bit sloppy. And we have to pare this back too here. So actually, first things first, let's, before we get into dimensioning this here, let's pare this back in here. What I mean by that is that these like little legs on the front, they're out just a little bit from the surface of these sides here. Some of them a little bit more so than others. So just gonna take a chisel real quick, and we're just gonna pare them back a little bit so that they're flush with the sides here. Probably don't really have to do this step. And if you wanted to omit it on your birdhouses, I don't think it would be the end of the world. I would just try to get it somewhat flush. And probably could have done this straight off the bandsaw. But I don't mind just a little bit here of handwork. Not trying to be super accurate about it, but I want to get it pared back a little bit so that our bottom will work a little bit easier. That's probably good enough. This side's actually pretty good already. Gonna call that fine. So you see that's a little too snug. It isn't going to fit. Ow. So what we want to do is we want to cut this off a little bit. I'm going to test it out on the other one and see if it's just about this same kind of snugness, so we can take off on this whole piece before cutting it in half. That's what we're going to do. I'm going to run this whole thing through the bandsaw and take off probably a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch all on just one side here. And that should probably give us enough clearance all the way around here on the 3 critical sides to be able to have a generous fit around here. This is going to allow it to move easily, but also allow some ventilation to come up around the sides here so that you can get some ventilation in here for the birds. So I'm just going to go over the table saw and zing off a little bit here. All right, is that enough? I think that will be fine. See how it is? It's kind of gappy here. We got about probably a little more than a 1/16 around it, and that's just fine. And we're gonna have a little bit of a gap in the back as well too. All right, so I think what we want to do now is figure out where we want these, how much we want these to protrude from the birdhouse. So let's come back over here and look at that a little bit better. All right, guys, here's the board that's going to become the floor for both the birdhouses. I just sent it all the way to the back here. So obviously it's not going to stick out this much. What do we have to play with? Or how much overall is this board anyway? We are 10 3/4. And this is, well, if we have our 3/4 inch overhang, I'd say a little bit of space in the back, we'd be at 5.5 inches, which won't quite work for this board here. We would need an 11-inch long board, and it's just shy of that. So well, we're going to have to go something a little bit shorter. So I think we're going to have a front porch. The overhang is going to come out to right about here. So let's figure about, we probably cut these to be about 5 1/4. And that will give us somewhere between a 1/2 inch to 5/8 of an inch of a little front porch here. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut this board to, going to get 2 pieces out of here that are 5 1/4 inches long, and that will become the floors for the bottom of this. So let's, I'm going to go over to the circular saw, miter saw, cut this to 5 1/4. Let's just double check this before we do that, because this is the only one left. Yeah, that'll be fine. All right, here we have our 5 1/4 measurement from this end here. Just going to line this up with the saw blade. Pretty good. Like to set my stop so that way I don't have to measure again. Cool. All right, guys, we just cut these to size, and before we go ahead and install them into the birdhouse, what I'd like to do, because it's going to hinge back here on a nail, right, so that we can clean out the birdhouse, what I would like to do is provide a little bit of clearance back here, right along this back here, so that it'll be able to hinge down a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do, just the easy way, is I'm just going to zing off a corner of this here, kind of like so, on the on the table saw to get kind of help to establish that, and then we'll round it over a little bit with either a block plane or sander or something like that. So let's go over the table saw and do that real quick. I think that'll work. All right, now let's get to how we're going to be installing these guys, these doors. Okay, guys, something that we would like to do now is we want to get the holes drilled in here for the floors to go in. So the floors are going to sit up in here. They're going to sit into the birdhouse up about a 1/4 inch from the bottom. So I have these spacers that I found in the scrap bin. I'll get to this one here in a second, but this spacer is going to we're going to use this in the back here when we go to install this, when we go to nail it in. But what we want to do is size these holes in about the right spot. So since it's up about, the floor of the floor is up about 1 inch from the bottom of the birdhouse, that means that our center point for this board here, since it's 3/4 of an inch, is about 5/8 up from the bottom of here. And the beam on this combination square is 3/4 of an inch wide. So what I'm going to do then is just line up here the combination square at the bottom of the birdhouse and I'm going to put a mark that's just on this other side of the slot, so that way it's just a little bit this way of half of the beam here. So just so you understand, I'm lining up the beam on the seam, and I'm up from the bottom 5/8, and that's going to give approximate location where you want to put the nail hole. Do that on both sides. Line up on the seam again. Flush on the bottom. So right here I have our tick mark where we're going to put a nail, and another tick mark where we're going to put that nail. So I want to drill these holes just a little bit larger than the nail so that it will actually turn in here, and even turn on the, a little bit larger, pretty much the same size as the head. So I have just under 1/8 of an inch for the head. So that's fine. We'll put a 7/64. It's actually go to a 3/32. That'll be probably a little tight, and that will be fine. Perfect. Now we can move on to putting our doors in. But before we will put our floor/door in here, I'm going to just take a minute. I want to kind of go around and round over this whole stuff, because it's going to be a little bit harder to get to some of these spots once it's installed. So just going to grab some sandpaper. Just hit these corners a little bit. Okay, so the next step here, now we got these sort of sanded out a little bit, is I would like to, and part of the reason why I have these spacers here, is I would like to take this spacer here, the 1/4 inch one, we're going to put it back towards the back here, almost all the way. It's going to raise it up off the bench. You'll kind of get this here in a second. I'm just taping it in place because I don't want it to wander around and cause a potential issue. It'd probably be fine, but this will just give me a little extra peace of mind. So just taping that in place so it doesn't wander around. And then that will sit on the bench like this here. And I'm going to use this spacer. This is about a 1/16 of an inch, maybe not quite. And we're going to put that back here, and then kind of close up our birdhouse around like that. Now what should be happening, and I'm kind of looking through here, just sort of wiggling stuff to make sure everything is all aligned. It does seem to be. So that the back of our floor is up a 1/4 inch from the bottom of from the workbench. So that means it should be up about 1 inch into the birdhouse cavity here. And that's just fine, because then when we go to actually attach that or screw this up into the front of this here, that will close up the rest of this here. But that will just give our whole, the floor, it'll raise it up off the bottom just here a little bit. So let's tack this into place. Pop our screws in there. And it's kind of important, I think, too, to hold on. You don't want this to wiggle around too much. I mean, the birdhouse body in relation to the floor. So we could put a clamp on it, which probably wouldn't be a bad idea, just to help it to stay right there. And I think I'm even going to stick my hand down through here and kind of put a little downward pressure. Just drive it in flush like that for a minute. Reverse the clamp. Great, now those are flush and they're in, but I would like to set them in a little bit deeper. All right, that's down 1/4 of an inch maybe, but of course it did come back out on this side because our floor is going to wiggle around inside there. So that's That should be okay. All right, guys, here we are. We got to put the... We're going to use this screw here to keep the bottom closed in between the, for the majority of the year while the birds are in there. We want to kind of center that up on our floor. So I'm drawing a mark over at 2, drawing another mark at 2. So right in the middle there is our center, and I was kind of using the tape measure to get sort of a center line in between where the front is at. Countersink bit. And we'll just go ahead and put the screw in there. All right, I'm going to get into it easy to clean, but we'll keep it nice and securely closed for the majority of the year while it's being inhabited. All right, let's move on to the roof. The most fun part, I think. All right, guys, we're going on to the roof work right now, but the next step in part of this roof is we wanted to install this here, and I'm going to call this our ridge beam. Lack of a better term here. So the width or the dimension from the front to the back of this birdhouse is about 5.5 inches, and I think we want to have about an inch and a half or so overhang of the sheet metal from the front of the birdhouse. So that means we want to have probably about 7 inches or so of the sheet metal, and I want to have, or the width of the sheet metal, and I want to have this thing then also about 7 inches. So let's put a mark on here of 7 inches. And we'll go over to the miter saw, set up a block and cut both of these the same here. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do, it's not probably a step that we'd necessarily have to do, but I want to take this ridge beam down a little bit in height, because I want to, when we go to attach this, we want to counterbore the screw down into this ridge beam quite a little ways so that we don't hit it with the bandsaw. We don't have any kind of interference like that. So I want to have as much space for my bit to go down in here. So we're just going to zing off this top here. It looks like it's a proud 1/8 on the table saw. Should only take a moment. I think that should work. So I'm just going down. I hope you can see that that's just going down, probably 3/8 of an inch or so down inside of the ridge beam here. That should provide us with our clearance. Want to make it secure, but we don't need to go nuts on that because I don't want it to split, like I said. It'd be kind of bad. But there, that should give you an idea. It's pretty well counterbored down in there, quite a little ways, about 1/2 inch, but that will give us plenty of clearance for when we come back here and hit with the bandsaw, and we completely avoided the vent hole, which is excellent. Yeah, actually, that's going to be all right. So that should give us an idea. So I darkened up the lines a little bit here, and I kind of transfer the lines. Yeah, I blipped it a little bit. I didn't do it spot on, but I kind of put the lines up here a little bit of where we're going to be starting the bandsaw up on the ridge here. So let's go on over to the bandsaw and get that cut off. All right, I hope we don't hit a nail or a screw. All right. Perfect. Now we have a chunk of metal with no holes in it. And no whatever that is. All right, so we got to cut this now right down the middle. Okay, and we'll cut right down the middle of that line here. All right. Now, let's bring the birdhouses back over here and kind of see how these fit. Get an idea of probably how much to take off. All right, guys, I've got the two pieces here, but I think that we want to, I noticed that I think I cut them out a little bit wider than they need to be. So they're overhanging the roof by almost 3/4 of an inch. So we want to get some of that cut down before we start kind of making this up. But first, I want to actually cut them to, I want to make them shorter. They're not going to be this long at all. So doing a kind of, I was thinking about where to bring them down exactly. And I think we're going to try to come just a little bit above the holes for the sides. So taking the tape measure, see if I can kind of do it so you guys can see a little better. We're going to hold that tape measure just about a 1/2 inch or so above that nail hole and bend it around here. So I'm coming up to about 18 inches. So let's cut these maybe a little bit longer for now because we can tune that up a little bit later. So let's cut these to say about 18.5 inches in length, you know, something about like that. And then we'll cut off that 3/4 inch that we need to get the width a little bit closer. All right, let's tackle that. A little mark at 18.5. I'll extend that over. Okay, I think the next step now, guys, is we want to find the center of the metal here on both of these pieces. And I got these two blocks kind of set up. The idea is that I want to use these to kind of improvise a break. So we can kind of bend the metal over that to make it make a nice crisp edge where it will sit right in the middle on the top of the ridge beam here. So I'm going to kind of set a few things up, and we'll tackle that project here momentarily. All right, guys, I got a center line on the back of the roof for the birdhouse marked out, and I got it kind of in here in my little improvised break so we can make a somewhat crisp line there. And I also got the center line, this one you can maybe see a little bit better, on this other roof here on the back side. So we'll do that one here in a second. So let's see if we can bend this over and try to get kind of a crisp line. We're going to go past 45, because remember our peak of our roof is a little bit, I don't know what it is, but it's certainly more than 45. So that's about all we're going to get, unless if I cut this wood down a little bit, but I don't think we're going to need to do that. Okay. Hope this sort of looks all right. Yeah, I think that's going to be all right. We'll have to trim the lengths a little bit, but I kind of expected that. Whoa, this is not cool. Okay, we got a problem here. I don't know how that happened. Between the unsquared birdhouse or the probably unsquared metal, but wow, if I flush this side up over here to the back of the birdhouse, we're hanging off on this back side over here probably 3/8 of an inch. I don't know if you can quite see that, but that's kind of a lot hanging out. I wasn't expecting that. I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker. We'll be able to live with that somehow. Okay, let's probably cut this to size though. So I think I'm going to clamp it here temporarily so we can get a measurement, because I would like it I'd like the roof to at least end in the same spot, and preferably just about a ½ inch or so above the nail holes here. And they're going a little bit further on both sides, which is fine. I'd rather have a little bit too much to work with than not enough. But I'm going to clamp them down on each birdhouse and get some measurements so we can try to make it even. All right, guys, I marked a line about a ½ inch up the sides in the birdhouses. That should give the roof then should terminate just a little bit before that nail. So let's snip these guys out. Yeah, I think I like that a little bit better, where it ends just above those nail holes, just a little bit below the entrance to the birdhouse. Right, ran into a little bit of a issue. It's not a big deal, but something to have to deal with. So I was kind of thinking about the placement of these nails for the roof, right? Anywhere up here is going to be a problem, because we might run into that screw that we put in for the ridge beam here. And honestly, that's going to probably hit, or there's a chance it might hit our vent hole here. So we need to come down a little ways here just to clear our vent hole, probably about that far. So I was thinking about our first hole down from the peak being something like 3 1/4 inches. So after kind of looking at that, I'm thinking, well, putting three nails here doesn't make sense anymore. So we'll probably just do 2 nails, this one here and one down here. So I think that's what we're going to work with. I'm going to just do 2 nails per edge and hope that works out fine. I think it'll be fine. All right, guys, I want you to see how I'm marking this out when I got this overhang on the front side. I have an overhang on the back too, but it's not quite as big of an overhang. So I'm just taking a pencil here. You could use a scrap piece of wood, whatever, but I'm using a pencil. I know roughly where I want the nail hole to be. It's right about in here. So since the front is 3/4 inch material, I'm going to try to split that difference and do a 3/8 off of the front of the birdhouse right here. To give you an idea, that's about where that corner is at. So I'm going to have 1 nail right about here, about 3/8 up from the edge of the metal, which is right about there. So that's easy enough. We're just going to use the tape measure, kind of get it on our pencil line that was the edge. Put a line there. But here, it's a little tricky because we got so much of that overhang. So here I'm just going to do this little trick. So that's about what our difference is. No measuring. So that line represents the front face here. So then we just need to go 3/8 back from that. So that has That's where our nail is going to be. I'm going to do the same thing up here because I already have the 3 1/4 that we talked about coming down from the peak. So there. And that line is the front face, the face of the front. So let's go 3/8 back from that. And voila. I'm going to do it a couple times. We're going to kind of get an idea of where we want this roof to blend, but I'm thinking that we want to come down, I don't know, 1.5 inches, 2 inches from the peak, keep this flat, and then sort of mimic the curve of the shape of this thing, and then kind of flush up with the face down here with the metal here. Something like that. All right, guys, how does this look for a line? I think it looks okay. I did more or less the same thing on the other side. So we're going to cut the roof out to, or the front of the roof out to this line here. But I do think what we're going to do, since we got it in place, and we already center punched these holes, I've just uncover a couple layers of tape here. Going to go ahead and drill these, because I think it'll make life a little bit easier when we come back for the next step of nailing this guy on. So let's do that. All right, I think that will be all right. Probably could go ahead and nail this thing on now. Yeah, this is not going to work out well in the vise. I think we're going to have to get this attached, get this on the bench somehow a little bit differently. There you got it, guys. Got some finish work to do here. Sand, you know, we're not, especially in the back, we're not flushed up here, so the angle grinder will take care of that and kind of take the burrs off and stuff, but that's not too shabby. I'm kind of stoked. I don't know how well we'll get in here, but that's actually not too bad. Hope that you can see this okay. I have to remember, this actually gets up there pretty close. I thought it would be, I don't know, for some reason I didn't think that this was going to work out very well, but seems like that is working out all right. Maybe we can do this a little bit on this other day. There's only about 1/8 inch or so on this side sticking out, but I think it's, oops. I heard the crunch of some wood. Definitely sheared off some more wood there. That's not bad. A lot better than I was expecting. Gosh, that's almost flush. Not going to leave much of a job for the angle grinder. All right, guys, I got the angle grinder set up with the a flap disc wheel in here, and I'm just going to hit this. Not going to do too much up here, but just clean this up a little bit at the very top. All right, guys, I went through and kind of just did a little bit of hand sanding on the birdhouses just to remove that final little burrs that were left on there from the angle grinder with the sanding wheel. And put the dimensions up here of what the birdhouse is, so you get an idea. So again, it's like 13 inches tall and 5.5 inches square on the bottom. The roof was about 7 inches there, and we ended up making this only stick out about 1/2 inch. So the floor or perch or front porch, or what do you want to call it, only sticks out about 1/2 inch. And as I promised, right here is the cut list, right here. All right, let's go over this cut list a little bit here. So this cut list is for one birdhouse. Now, as I mentioned, you should be able to get 2 birdhouses out of one 1x6 that is 8 feet long. The board we were using was a little bit wider than that, and it was a little bit longer than that too, if I recall. So it should work out perfectly for one 1x6, 8 feet long, to get 2 of these birdhouses. You have to just double these numbers up. So we cut, we cut 4 pieces, but you want to cut 2 pieces to 13, and they're already at 5.5 for your fronts and backs. The sides are going to be 7 inches tall. You could change this a little bit if you want to. We probably didn't have to be 7 inches tall, but that's what we made it to. I don't know that I would go any higher than that. I don't see the benefit to going much higher than 7 inches, but if you feel like you want to, you can go for it. I would cut it to 4 inches though, because the house wrens, from what I've heard, they want to have a interior floor plan of about 4 by 4 inches, and that's going to give you your 4 by 4 inches if you cut your sides to that. The floor itself was 5.25 inches. So that's from all the way back here to the front. It was about 5.25 inches. That you might want to season to taste. You might want to have it a little, more flush with the front so it doesn't stick out like that. You might want to have it stick out further. And that way you'd want to change that 4.25 dimension to something a little bit different. The 3 7/8, you could have gone a little bit smaller than that. I wouldn't go much bigger than that. And that's just so that we have some ventilation coming in from around the, up through the birdhouse. So I didn't have to drill any extra holes or whatever. This has just got some nice ventilation around the 3 sides and a little bit coming underneath the door there too. And the ridge beam then. The ridge beam was 7 inches long by 1.5 inches tall. And that got shortened down a little bit when we did our final cuts to kind of shape the roof. Now, one thing that might be kind of a different version of this birdhouse is if you wanted to have, if you knew you were going to hang this like from a rope, from a tree, hang it with a rope or a string or whatever, a chain, you might want to have an overhang also going to the back. So in that case, you might want to have, instead of 7 inches, you might want to have, say, 8.5 or something, or whatever you want to have your overhang be on the front and or back. You might want to change that ridge beam to reflect that. And again, that 1.5 inches was kind of just a number pulled out of the sky. There's no particular place. It will get shortened up when you make your final cut for the roof there. And the metal for this one birdhouse, if you unfolded this, would be about 18 inches by about 7 inches. I would definitely make this oversized. So probably add 1/2 inch or so to this dimension so that you can make it a little bit oversized, maybe even a whole inch to that dimension. So you can make it oversized and then feather that in once you've got it kind of on the birdhouse and secured. You could shape it into the size a little more correctly. I'm not real sure. I think the home improvement store sells these, but I'm pretty sure I bought smaller stuff in the hardware aisle at the home stores, but I don't know if they sell bigger pieces or what. I'm sure you can find it there, but I haven't really gone looking for it myself. Guys, I had a ton of fun with this, and to me, this was a scrapwood project because that board had been kicking around outside in my garage attic. I had my roof replaced, so there's been all sorts of debris on that board. It was just kind of junky, with the nail holes in there and stuff like that. It was so badly cupped, and knowing what I know now too, working with it, it was so brittle. It was really not fun to work with. It wasn't something that I would use in a piece of furniture or even a shop fixture. wasn't really cool. So to me, it was destined to either be used for a exterior project, something that's going to be outside, or in the burn pit. I don't think I really would have used it for anything nice. So to me, it was kind of a cruddy board. If you could kind of save up some scraps too, you get enough scraps together when you're building other pieces of when you're doing other woodworking, you get enough scraps together, you could certainly come up with enough to build a birdhouse if you didn't want to go to the store to buy anything. I don't recommend taking apart your house to get the tin, so I would try to source that somewhere, maybe your neighbor's house. But I had a ton of fun making this. This is a great build, great little build. It only took maybe about 6 hours. I know I spanned it out over about 3 days, but really it's only about 6 hours. So if you enjoy stuff like this, please subscribe. There's other stuff coming out. I have probably about a dozen projects on my mind that I want to share with you guys. Only one of them is bird related. It's another exterior project that's going to be a water trough, a concrete water trough, about the size of your kitchen sink. And some picture frames. At any rate, if you don't want to miss out on some of that, it's not all going to be things like this that will be folk art, we'll say. Be some nicer, maybe a little more high-level woodworking. So please hit the subscribe down there so you don't miss out on some of that content. And also when we put these things outside. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys.